Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Um, I'm Chloe, and I'm with the Tri-County Regional Energy Network. And this morning we are joined by Larry and Alex from Electrify My Home for a training on retaining profit, minimizing callbacks on heat pump projects. And before I pass things off to Larry for today's training, I have a few intro slides to go over. Thanks. You're recording today's training, and a copy of that recording as well as the slides will be sent out to you in the next few days. So keep an eye out for that. We're also going to be launching a survey at the end of today's training. It really helps us if you can fill this out. All of the results of the survey are used to direct future course offerings. So if you like today's training, you'd like to see more like it, let us know. You can go to the next slide. We are the Tri-County Regional Energy Network, aka 3CREN. We're funded by ratepayer dollars that we all pay into in our utility bills through the public goods charge. And the benefit of being ratepayer funded is that there is no cost to those that we serve. And as a regional energy network, we are able to return these dollars back to our local economy, which has historically missed out on some of these funds. 3CREN has 6 programs that fall across 3 service areas. These include incentives, training, and technical assistance. Today's training falls under our Building Performance Training Program. To see more of our events and learn more about our other programs, you can visit 3c-ren.org. And here's a few of our achievements over the past few years. We're excited to keep growing in all of these areas in the future. And with that, I'll pass it off to Alex and Larry for today's training.
Well, that was nice and easy. Thank you, Chloe. Good morning, by the way. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It is about a couple of minutes after 8. We're going to roll through this program this morning. Like we always do, I always share the company mission statement in every training that we do to every customer. If you have a company and you don't have a mission statement, I implore you to get one. It's a good way to kind of gauge where you're going in your business. Anyway, so our mission is to provide the most efficient, cost-effective electrification solutions to California homeowners, and that means everything, not just heat pumps, not just heat pump water heaters, but a full plethora of options and opportunities for my customers to fully electrify their homes with one company that they have to deal with. We do this thing called practicing good stewardship of the electrical panel, and you guys might have heard of this as like the Watt diet, but one of the things that we love to do is keep our customers on their original electrical system whenever possible, so that we don't have to burden the electrical infrastructure in certain neighborhoods by adding more power when we don't need it, and we usually don't need it. The panels can be over, but there's a lot of solutions we can do. So that's that good stewardship part, and you guys are part of this training and influence other contractors do the same. We have a passion here for having electrification come out right and not tax the grid too much, and be an overall societal good. And everything we do considers electrification in the most efficient way possible. Okay, so introductions and welcome. We got that. There's Chloe. Alex is on the line with us on our end too. He'll be answering your questions. If any pop up, just throw them up there in the questions box or the chat, and he'll take care of that. We'll go into the introduction here. We're going to talk a little bit about consumer education. It's really important if you want to avoid callbacks to put the customer understands all of the operational changes and way they're going to have to use the units, and understands what they're getting into, so that they don't call you when some little thing happens and you have to roll a truck out because there's water dripping out of a condensate line or something. Okay. So we'll get into that, avoiding callbacks on the heat pump installs and avoiding callbacks on the heat pump water installs. And just like every other training that we do, all of this information is gathered in our lab that we call Electrify My Home, and the activities that we go through every day. And when we come across something new, we add it to the program. So the best way to avoid callbacks is to prevent them in the first place. And sometimes that's just informing our customers of what's really going on. We should be telling them Up front, what to expect. There should be multiple touch points. Our people in our offices should be able to communicate to them when they know something's happening that's perfectly normal. So you don't roll a truck out there for a technician to tell the customer that's perfectly normal, because that's perfectly expensive. Okay, saving time up front, planning ahead makes a big difference when you're electrifying somebody's house. We use this 7 habits of highly effective people kind of transduced into highly effective electrification projects. But a couple of the big ones here are being proactive, letting the customer know, doing safety checks, making sure everything's okay in the house. Don't put a new heat pump HVAC system in if they've got a bad spilling water heater. Begin with the end in sight, understand what the total goal of the customer is along their electrification journey. Some people want to electrify everything in their house for whatever reasons they want to do it for. Other people just want a really good heat pump because their neighbor got one and it works good. Other people don't want heat pumps because a lot of companies go out there and install ones that don't work good. So that's really important too. We can catch up on some other training on that. Always put first things first. Make sure you do the safety, take care of the safety stuff, do things in the right order. Think win-win. Our customer needs to win and we need to win. Our customers aren't going to win for very long if we don't charge enough for our work. We need to make sure we're charging enough for our work that we can stay in business and not have to worry about things like that. Seek first to understand and be understood. Synergize. If there's other contractors involved, and I understand all of you out there are probably not as nutty as we are in trying to do everything on every job. That is a nice service for the customer to have one person to call. Does give you the ability to, charge a fair price for everything. But if you're working with other contractors, make sure you synergize on these things. We've had situations where they want to work with their electrician. We go out there and the electrician screwed everything up from when we were looking at it. And we got to reinvent the wheel when we get out there. So synergizing is really important. And go to trainings like this and keep your saw sharp. Keep your saw sharp. All right. So what is the Achilles heel to profitability? And that would be callbacks or reworks or not finishing the project or not passing a HERS test or whatever the case may be. And there's gonna be somebody that's responsible for that and at your company. So, and maybe it's you, maybe you're a small company. But we need to understand what these things are and categorize them. So at our company, a callback is a return service call to correct work on a job that's already been completed. Perceived urgent issue requiring schedule scrambling, which is always fun. Or an upset or disappointed customer. We do not want upset or disappointed customers. I get very upset when something like that happens here because it's my name on the line. All of you out there who have built your companies, you built your reputation. Your reputation rides on every customer, on every subcontractor you use, and every one of the employees in your company. And if they disappoint a customer, I feel personally when that happens in my company that I've let my customer down and my people have let me down. So got to have a good coach, got to have somebody who's responsible for it, somebody you can hold responsible that has some accountability. What is a go back? A go back is just when a job doesn't get finished all the way and then there's a punch list at the end. Those are terrible because if your schedule is like ours, we're scheduled out into late November right now. If I have a customer that doesn't get finished on schedule, it's really hard for us to put something else into the schedule for them. So that just really throws a monkey wrench in, even worse than like, hey, my system isn't working. I have technicians could take care of that, but I don't want my service technicians taking care of my installs because that throws off all the job costing numbers. So, and then what is a complaint call? A call or an email from a customer whose system does not meet their expectations. And that happens once in a while, even when you try really hard. And, it all goes back to the owner. The owner is responsible for his entire team. We put people in place to guide the team. That's the coach. It's just like football. I tell my guys when a team loses, who's the first one to get let go is the coach. We can make them because you can bring another coach in and your team works fine. Anyway, so enough football analogies. It is football season. Man, it is football season. Can't wait. Anyway, so how much does a callback cost? We did a little bit of research. We kind of dug into the files. We got a little crazy. We spent a few hours looking at a lot of stuff one day, and we figured out that at our company, the majority of our work is about 30 minutes away. We don't have a great proliferation in the city that we're at, but we have a great proliferation in like 3 towns over. And when I have to roll somebody 3 towns over for a call, um, if we talk about mileage, 25 miles both ways at IRS rate, $126 for labor, 45 minutes each way. Usually I've got 2 techs riding in a truck. Sometimes we have to have those technicians stop at somebody's house if that's the case on the way back. And then I end up sending 2 techs over there. I will send the service tech over there, but we do have that time that's spent every day. When a technician is behind the windshield, he's not learning to do better. He's not getting another job done. He's just spending dead time going out to do something that wasn't finished properly. So by the time they wrap it up and get out and get everything done, got a couple hours there. But we were looking at the overall cost of what we were doing, and it cost us about $403 to send 2 guys out for 2 hours to go fix something. And so that's a lot of money when you're looking at your bottom line and your profitability at the end of the year. That takes big chunks out real quick. It only takes 3 of those to be, $1,200. So just understand what it costs you to do this and understand that every time you go out, it's money you could save that could go to the bottom line. I used to work for a company before I started this one, and the owner had no care and wanted no time spent on understanding how much money we were spending on go backs and reworks. We couldn't get him to ever do that, and because he came up through the industry as an installer, and he understood that there was some reason why they couldn't put a screw in that unit and bolt it down. Right? To me, there's no excuse for that. Okay, I'm losing money on callbacks. What the heck can I do about it? So the best thing you can do is avoid them in the beginning, which is the topic for today. And number 2 is when you get them, learn from them. And our offices, we got quite a few people in our office. We have a 2-story building. 2 of us are upstairs. The rest of the office is downstairs. It's hard to communicate with that way. So we're having daily huddles and chatting, and that's an always changing thing. What information needs to be changed, because I've found that like even 2 people in the same office downstairs don't necessarily communicate unless it is actually catalyzed by having everybody in the same room and sharing all these conversations together. Keep a running list of all the callback issues categorized. That sounds easy, but it's hard. Write down each one that could have been avoided. Pick out themes and most common issues. Circulate feedback to all members of your team in a constructive way. We had an issue with this last month. The job supervisor we asked him to pull together a list of everything, and he was like jotting things down at the end out of memory, and I'm like, dude, where's your running callback list? Where is all this happening? Oh, I haven't been keeping up with that for a while. So you got to stay on top of this stuff to keep it going as well. So that's the reason why the companies really need to communicate. Okay. And we need to educate our customers properly so they understand what's normal about these things. So it starts at the first call. Our company's a little bit different. We do a virtual assessment. So customer gets on our website, fills out a form. We meet with them for an hour and a half call. We give them pricing right on that call. They enter into a handshake agreement with us, or we never go to their house. I know that sounds weird, but we have somewhere around, I think we're right around 39 to 40% closing on that process. and that process works for everything. So it just makes sense to do it that way for us. That way we don't have to spend a lot of time behind the windshield. And because of that, we can get in there and talk to the customer about all the little things that we're going to do, all the expectations of what's going to happen, so they hear it once from me. When my field supervisor goes out and does the job walk, the customer should be hearing that again from him. And then when the installation is done, they should be hearing it again from the installers. That's a perfect world. We're still working on a perfect world here. Got to do some customer discovery when we're talking to the customers. First of all, if you've ever gone to any of our other classes, we really talk about personality profiling and understanding who our customers are. But by chatting with the customer and finding out who they are, and finding out how they use their system currently. If I've got a customer that turns their furnace on for an hour in the morning and wears a sweatshirt all day, I'm going to have a very different conversation with them than I am the guy that keeps it at 72 all day and doesn't worry that much about energy costs. One of the things I'm going to talk about is you're going to have to leave your heat pump on, dude. This thing is not going to warm up your house like the furnace does. I'm going to give you the permission to be comfortable. And that means you're going to have to understand that this machine's going to be running. If somebody's been heating their house up for an hour every day for years, and they've been doing that, it's going to be hard for them to get in there. And they're going to make that, even after they've been told 3 times, they're going to say, man, this thing runs a lot. And my guy down on that answers the phone here in the shop needs to be able to say, that's perfectly normal. If you would like, you should have been told that a couple of times. So how do you use your system currently is really, really important. It's also important to be able to get an idea of how much it's going to cost to run their new system. Customers aren't necessarily going to save money if they just ran their furnace for an hour in the morning. And if they just ran their furnace for an hour in the morning and that furnace was oversized and their house is leaky and you don't fix the house when you put in the heat pump, it's going to cost a lot more in energy. So we need to have that conversation with our customers. I always ask the customers, what's bringing you to us? What have you heard? Why are you looking for a heat pump right now? In the communities we work in, a lot of it is I want to I want to do right by the environment. I just heard my neighbor said that they're really comfortable. Usually customers that have gone through us before. I've heard other ones that say, I don't know, I've heard that they're good, but some people tell me they blow cold air, they're loud and obnoxious. And I says, you aren't talking to people that had our system put in. And then, do you have a place in mind for the outdoor unit? We always ask that up front, and then we can get over that conversation, because sometimes in some of the areas we work in, there's just not 4 feet of space on either side of the house. And they don't want the system put in the backyard. So I'm trying to address that issue during our first conversations so we can get that hard conversation out of the way. Okay. What is their starting point? Most of them have always had a gas furnace. Like 100% of our customers were replacing gas, always had a gas water heater, and never lived with a heat pump. So if I don't tell them how a heat pump is going to work and fully explain that these things are going to run longer and explain how the process of heating your house works with an inverter heat pump system and why they should only buy an inverter heat pump if they're changing from gas, like we should not be putting in traditional heat pumps in houses that had a gas furnace before. We just shouldn't. They don't provide enough comfort, and they're going to cause problems that you're going to get service calls in the wintertime. So um now you guys live in a pretty nice climate down there in the Tri-County area. I was just down in Oxnard for a few days um at the at the little resort that's right on the beach out there. Man, Oxnard's really pretty the closer you get to the beach. Anyway, I digress again. So these people have never lived with a heat pump. They need to understand how it's going to be different. And if we don't spend the time talking to them about that, it's going to create service calls and unhappy customers. Okay. So when we're comparing furnaces and heat pumps to our customers, we don't be afraid to explain the differences in operation, and don't be afraid to get in there and spin those potential negatives and positives. Like there's for everything someone can complain about, there's a reason why I want their heat pump to do that if we understand how they work. So furnaces have lots of capacity to create heat really fast, which means leaky old Swiss cheese houses can still heat up. because there's so much excess waste heat there. So lots of capacity to create heat. So it's on and off is okay. We need to talk about customers. We need to talk about the on-site pollution, the safety risks of having a furnace, and then the better environment we can create with a heat pump. We need to explain that these things are going to have long cycles. And with inverter heat pumps, which we install only inverter heat pumps, that sometimes that they're gonna keep the house warm with air that's very close to room temperature. This can create a service call if you're blowing that cold air on the customers. It's really important that you don't do that. You got to put the right registers in these systems. The three-way registers that we have on the furnaces are not the right registers for heat pumps. So now we can reframe these negatives into positives. What's if I've got a longer cycle moving heat and I put a really good filter on there, what's the benefit now of me having a longer cycle? I've got more time to pull the air across this filter and clean the air in the house and really clean that air up nice, more than I do that with a furnace that's going to cycle every 5 or 10 minutes on a mild day, right? So um one of the negatives to positives, hey, it's going to use electricity, but it's going to save on carbon emissions and on-site potential gas leaks and things like that. So that's a benefit. It's going to match the capacity that they need instead of just blowing a ton of heat in there and getting the room really warm, and even worse, getting the ceiling really warm and pushing the heat out of the ceiling because we didn't have enough insulation in the attic. So we want to emphasize the comfort that they're going to get. Super quiet operation. The reason this unit runs so long is it runs low, which also equals really good filtered air and really quiet operation and really, really well mixed rooms. Like all your rooms are going to be very close to the same temperature if you direct the air out the right way. Use analogies. So one thing I'll ask a customer when they're talking about this and is do they own an electric car? Have they ever driven an electric car, or have they ridden in one? And like they're completely different. So you don't even have to use a brake pedal on an electric car. That's way different than a gas car. We don't have any of the noise. With an electric car, if you're always in the bottom of the pedal, the battery is not going to last as long. That's a good energy analogy. But we've changed the way we drive with electric vehicles. We're going to have to change the way we live slightly in electric homes. So we need to be talking about that. So um explain the different heat pump options. It's amazing how many ducted mini split heat pumps we install where the competition came out and bid a 5-zone mini split. Like they're going to spend all that time putting all that line cover on and all those lines on and put all those units in the house and put all this stuff on the outside of the house rather than do a load calculation and put a unit in the attic and put new ducts in. It blows my mind because it takes so much less time and it's so much less costly to put in a small ducted system in than it is a multi-zone. And then there's way less chance for leakage. So when I'm talking about these, and they are the right solution for certain houses, but not for every house, right? So use the takeaways from discovering your customer to do this step. Never overpromise. One of the problems we have with these types of systems is I have to match the outdoor capacity to the multiples of indoor units, which means a lot of times I'm putting in a system that's way bigger than the house actually needs, when I might have to put in a 45,000 BTU outdoor unit in order to get the right heads in the right areas, where I could have put in a 30,000 BTU ducted system and then have better fuel economy because I got better ramping capacity. So don't waste time on options that don't fit the home or the customer's needs. If you can't put a ducted system in, don't talk about it. You go directly to this, but don't always fall back on these because they've got their pluses and they've got their minuses, but I've only seen more minuses. Okay. Use pictures of real installed systems that you put in to emphasize different features or workmanship or things like that during your process. We have our whole virtual process is put together with a PowerPoint. So we get to know the customer. We do our 20 minutes of rapport building right on The virtual assessment, it's really easy to do. I know it sounds really foreign because you want to get that eye-to-eye contact, but it's so much easier once we've got past that part. It's so much easier to present virtually like a webinar and get the education out there with the customer. And the beautiful thing about that is you can record them. So later on, when the customer says, I don't remember you telling me that, or you never told me that, I've got them all recorded. Like I can just send them the recording of our original contact and they can see, like, we definitely talked about that. That's actually never come up, but we do keep them recorded just for that reason. And I will go back. I have had customers mention something to me like they didn't know that, and I will go back and look at the recording and make sure I did talk to them about it. So that's a great way to do it. It's much harder to do when you're doing an in-home consultation. And you know what, we have traffic here too, and we don't want to get stuck in traffic waiting to go down to somebody's house. It just burns people's time. So the virtual assessment, when you're just sitting at your desk and you're going over it, you're getting the cost to the customer. Um, so the customer understands what these systems cost up front before you drive out there and find out they're just a tire kicker is extremely valuable. Okay. Many customers are going to think it's best to have a one-on-one system per room. Some customers only know when they've done research online about heat pumps. They find a lot of information about mini splits and they kind of think, oh, I saw that diagram on one of the mini split manufacturers things where all the rooms were different temperatures and they make it look like you can run heating and cooling at the same time. And we need to talk to the customer and let them know that doesn't always work. And I've got this multiple unit problem. There's also a ton more refrigerant in there. There's a whole bunch of things that we can get away from that. I always want to default to a ducted system if I can, because they just provide better comfort and less service problems. So zoning must be done very carefully with these. So our next webinar is on inverter system zoning options and the best way to do them that we found. That's going to be on our next webinar. So join us with that. But zoning needs to be done really carefully with these. Now, if I have a multi-zone unit and I'm going to put zoning in a couple different areas and I'm going to do two ducted systems, I might do it with two individual systems instead of one. So it just depends on, the application, as you guys know. Okay. So everybody is responsible. Every member of your company should be responsible for setting expectations with customers. Everybody should have basic intro training on basics of heat pumps at a minimum. We do go over this. We have a quarterly meeting where everybody goes to the class for an entire day and we hit them up and kind of refresh. And then we have these meetings in between time if we figure out that there's some communication issue going on. And as you start to build your businesses, there's going to be a whole bunch of more things that the communication is going to be. So CSRs, the ability to field most basic questions about the operation. So one of the things that we did to help our CSRs is we put together, I don't have one here on my desk. We put together this owner's manual. And the owner's manual is just topic and QR code. Topic and QR code. It's like, is my system leaking? There's water coming from my outdoor unit. They scan the QR code. It goes to a video of somebody from my company explaining what's going on. And then my dispatcher only has to say, get your owner's manual out, turn to page 3, scan that barcode, and that'll explain what's going on. So that has saved so many problems. And it took about a week to put it all together. Not a solid week, but had to get the little videos going and everything. So dispatchers, the customers they should be explaining to the customers what they should expect from the visit and who to contact if technical questions arise. So if you have and we have this a little bit of our company, we have an over reliance on email and text messages and not verifying that a customer actually saw them. So getting that human touch, emails and text messages are no replacement for the human touch. So we need to make sure that gets done. Accounting. Somebody in your office that's doing the accounting, if it's not you, you need to be aware of like what the callbacks are going, how many hours are spent on callbacks. When the payroll is done, I get a payroll report every 2 weeks and I look and see like who's been clocking in overtime. We have a rule at our company, overtime only if it's on the last day and we need to finish the job. And we found some of the guys like get into what they're doing and they'll clock overtime on the first day of the job, and they have to stay on top of that and let them know right away. That's not the way this works. But we were able to do that because I have my payroll person is looking at that very carefully. Our sales team needs to give explanations during the first visit and then again after a happy call. Just make sure we don't have any questions. Is everything okay? Did the installers inform you of everything? And if you ask somebody if they were informed of everything and they weren't informed of something, how do they know? So there's certain things you need to go over. But we need to during the sales process, we need to make sure that the customers are getting those things. Like in the wintertime, there's going to be water by this outdoor unit. There's going to be a line coming out that's going to have water dripping out of it in the summer that you're not used to seeing. They need to know that. Otherwise, they're going to call and say, my new unit is leaking, right? The technicians need to have a detailed walkthrough and thermostat training. This can be problematic sometimes, especially when new thermostats come out. This happened to me recently. Our company's gotten to the point where I don't actually go out and go to the customers' houses very much anymore. And so one of the brands that we sell has a new thermostat that they're offering, and we've been installing it because it's a better thermostat. And I went out there and I had no idea how to use it. So I knew I had to do a refresher on how to use that thermostat just in case that happens again. So we need to also think about our technicians. If we're using something new, we need to make sure the technicians have an understanding of it and feedback with them so they know. And then the owners and GMs of the company, we need to empower our team members to head off issues with training and feedback loops. And this sounds easy, but it's not. It's hard. It's hard to get people to tell you what's going on out there unless you take them aside. And sometimes when they're super busy, it's hard to find time to take people aside. So it's a really important thing to do. We're working on doing that better. But it's really, really important. Every time we have our sit down with our lead installers, we find out so much gold. Like we were able to have one of those meetings with one of our guys last week, and we actually got in and adapted some of our pricing because some of our pricing wasn't right on. Sometimes the customer isn't one person. We need to keep this in mind. Yesterday I was doing a virtual assessment. The mother set the virtual assessment up. She did all the research. She found us. She loves us. She was referred by a customer or another customer of ours. Um, and she's the catalyst for the conversation in the family. There's a husband and wife there, a couple of kids, and the mom. And the mom is really advocating for them to do the project correctly. So but there is spouse and other family and not always able to meet with them. Another great reason to do virtual and have recordings because I can just send the whole recording and they can watch it again. Sometimes there's rental houses where I did one of these recently where a friend of mine owns several rentals and right in the town next door to us. And we did one of his houses, and the people that live in the house they had to be taught how to use everything just as much as he did. He made all the decisions. He didn't really tell them what was going on. Um, it's a kind of a board and care home that he runs. So we had to get in and make sure that the people that actually lived there understood how to run it. And he loves that he can control it from his phone. Okay. Architects, general contractors, and designers. These can be challenging. We got a couple of projects going on where we're working with these architect designers, and there's a lot of feedback that they need, especially if they're doing some of the things that the processes in your shop usually cover. Like I have one right now where the architect is getting the permit and it's including what we're doing. We're used to filling out the permit paperwork. There had to be communication in our office that like we're not pulling the permit on this when the architect is. And she's hitting us up for those little documents that we always do, like the sound ordinance stuff. And so it's another loop, and it's going through the wrong email system. So or it's going to the wrong person. So that feedback loop is really important. And that basic user guide for system operation with the QR codes and the videos is as simple as possible. When you try to explain something to somebody in an owner's manual, like in a paragraph, it can be taken many different ways. If they have a QR code and they can go right to a video and you're explaining it and touching the system, then it's a lot easier for them to understand. Okay. Where are we at? 8:35. Okay. So avoiding callbacks on HVAC installs. 5 things we need to tell the customer about their heat pumps. These are going to help you. This is some gold, folks, right here. The gold's coming in. If you got your gold pan out, we need to get all the rocks out of the gold pan right now because this is where the nuggets are. Okay. Avoiding callbacks on HVAC installs. Oops. Is my button not working? No, it's where I was pushing to at the same time. Okay. So remember that $400 callback cost. We're just shredding money, dude, when we're going back and doing callbacks. We're just shredding money. And it's still a problem in our, we pay a lot of attention to it, and it's still a problem sometimes. So if you could avoid a callback or a go back by covering 5 topics in 10 minutes with the customer, would you do it? Yes, you would as a salesperson, you would as the owner, but are your guys doing it in the field? Is your field supervisor doing it if you have one? Are your installers doing it? There has to be some sort of an audit and a check on that and make sure it's happening. And sometimes it means your CSR in the office needs to call back and say, are you completely satisfied with everything that we've done? In the back of our owner's manual, there's a thing where the technician, there's pictures of all the technicians. The technician circles his picture. It says installed with pride, personal responsibility, and daily execution. And he has to sign the bottom of that thing. And he's handing them their owner's manual, and it has his signature on it. And that owner manual says, like, I've been told everything I need to be told about the system. And sometimes that's hard to do when the guys are leaving really late at night and trying to finish the job. Sometimes you need to pay attention to those, and maybe you got to send a service tech out to do the final startup and make sure the customer knows what they need. But how are you going to know if you're not told? And a lot of times the installers aren't going to tell you. So you got to get a feedback loop on that going, got to have somebody in the office looking at it. But if everybody's having this short conversation with the customer, you're going to avoid a lot of callback money. Okay. So one, thermostat operation. All these thermostats, and we make it hard sometimes. So we match the brand of we understand how all these different brands of systems work, and we match them to particular house and the particular way the customer wants to run their system. So we are installing a lot of different thermostats. So it's really important that the guys know. I got 2 guys here that are masters of the thermostat, and unfortunately, some of the other guys rely on them and call them in the middle of their jobs, which I'm trying to figure that one out. But relevant heat pumps, is it ducted, ductless, multi-zone? What is it? Your guys need to know how to set that system up when they go out. Um, the way we design our systems is if you keep it in auto mode, 90% of the year you're fine, but you're going to want to put that thing in high fan mode on the hottest and coldest days of the year. When we do our load calcs, we're usually matching high fan speed to total CFM in the duct system. And they're going to need to get that extra push and extra circulation on those hottest and coldest days of the year. We need to tell the customer that. We have the turbo mode for you. If it's not keeping up with heat or it's not keeping up with cooling, just put it into high fan on constant mode, and that's going to take care of it. We don't want you to have too much fan and too much circulation when you don't need it. We want the system to really match the seasons. So we happen to design our systems that way. So we have to tell the customers, run up that fan speed if it's a problem, and you got to recoup a little faster. Operational time. We need to talk to the customer about, like, this thing is going to run virtually for hours the first few cycles until it thermally equalizes the house. Then it's going to cycle more normally. So I have had customers call me up and tell me after I've told them that and say, you told me this was going to run a long time, but man, I had no idea. But I looked at my bill and it's not any higher. And I'm like, the slow operation of these systems it doesn't cost much, right? A fraction of what it costs to heat a house any other way if you do it right. So we tell them the benefit of that is it does run longer, but it's super quiet, super comfortable, and the air is super clean, right? Yep, that's what we get out of that. Okay. It's okay to set it and forget it with these systems. Some people have a huge psychological pushback on this because we've been told for years, hey, anytime you leave the house to go to the hardware store, you need to set back your thermostat. And that's because we always had systems that were way too big and they could recover really quickly. And it was cheaper to do that than it was to run it all the time. We're in a different world now. Energy costs are higher. We need systems that use less energy. But if we put systems in that use less energy, they're not going to recover as fast. So we got to tell customers, I'm going to give you the permission with the system to be more comfortable, but you're going to have to take me up on it. Every once in a while, we get one customer after the cold snap calling up and saying, my house won't get past 65. And I says, okay, well, turn it to 70 and leave it on. Let the house readjust and acclimate to 70 degrees, and then leave it there and tell me what's going on. And then they never call back. And we tell them that going in, but they forget, right? They go back to their old ways. I'm going to turn it all the way off at night and try to turn it on in the morning when it's 32 degrees outside and heat my house up. It doesn't work. So most customers only make that mistake once, right? So it's okay to set it and forget it. It's okay to keep your house warm and open the master bedroom window or the bedroom window, whatever, to keep the room cooler at night, and just shut the window in the morning and walk out into a warm house. That is way less energy dense than trying to reheat a house on a cold morning and having people run around in their robes and frantically calling you because their systems won't keep up. So this all needs to be explained. Avoid setbacks more than just a couple of degrees. Now, in my house, we have setbacks. My wife likes it kind of warm during the day, and she likes it super cold at night. And that's because I think we're approaching this point in our tenure of life. And she's got some challenges going on where she wants it really cool at night. And frankly, it drives me crazy. But we know these thermostat wars and families been going on forever. Didn't think they were going to come to my house though. But yesterday it's 76 in the house when I got home. Feels great. I love 76. It's wonderful. I'm sitting out doing some emails, and all of a sudden I feel the house is getting cooler, and I was, oh my God. My wife had it turned down to 70 degrees. She likes the house cool at 70 degrees. It can do that, especially in the evening with no problem. So, but I don't know. I digressed again. Sorry. So avoid setbacks more than a couple degrees. We tell our customers, if you're going to keep the house at 68 during the day, you can turn it down to 65 at night and you'll be fine. Crack that window open if you need the room to be cooler. Shut the vent if you think you need to do that. In the summertime, go ahead and cool the house down if you feel like you need to do that. It amazes me how many people don't have air conditioning with what my wife is going through on that whole thing, how that can go through that without air conditioning. So anyway, we also want to talk about TOU, time of use optimization. Preheating and pre-cooling the house is okay. We know we're in a different time right now. So we know energy costs are much higher between 4 and 9 p.m., like 30% higher on Southern California, Edison down there. You guys we're paying a lot for power between 4 and 9 p.m. So if we can pre-cool and preheat the house, get the house nice and chilly before they come home, and then set it up in cooling or set it down in heating at 4 o'clock. That's what we should be programming into our thermostats. We fully explain that. This is a way you can hypermile your system, pre-cool it before you get home. Don't wait till you get home and turn it on like everybody else does that complains about their high utility bills. Let it keep the house cool. Go from 70 to 74 between 4 and 9 p.m. and your house is still very comfortable. Same thing in the heating side. Let's get it up to 72 if you like it 68, and then turn it down to 68 at 4 o'clock. And then we preheat the house when power is cheap and coast through that 4 to 9 p.m. Okay. Set the thermostat for comfort, not based on the number, because their number, and we talk about this too, your number is going to be different with a heat pump than it was with a furnace. It just is. A lot of people have their furnaces turned down artificially low because the house gets so hot during every cycle. And so they do that to compensate for that, because if they run the thing at 72, sometimes it's going to get to be 75 air temperature before the thermostat reacts, because the thermostats don't react as fast as an oversized furnace will put the heat into the house. So it might be different with a heat pump. In fact, it's going to be different with a heat pump. We're going to give you the permission to be comfortable. You're going to have to use your system a little bit differently. Go back to that conversation about electric cars are different, electric homes are different. Okay. Okay. And if they've got a multi-zone system, if they want to regulate the temperature, if they got a multi-zone system with multiple heads in the rooms or ceiling cassettes or whatever, they're going to have to potentially run multiple zones at the same time, even if they're in one room, so that that thing doesn't always push maximum capacity. They need to know that. I've had customers say mostly from We actually had a customer walk in. We were having a meeting one day at our old shop. The guy comes in. He says, "Hey, I found you. You're the Mitsubishi guy. I had a system put in from somebody, and it sucks. Can you come out and look at it?" I says, "I'm not going to look at any system any other company put in because I'm not going to be in that whole thing." But what he explained to me is when we run our master bedroom at night, it's either very hot or very cold, and then I'm getting these weird smells in the system. And turns out they only had three 9,000 BTU heads on a 45 thousand BTU outdoor unit, because the customer at the end said, I want to put these other two heads on later. So they kind of created their own problem, but it was because it was oversized. Those units would never modulate down. They were always going at full capacity, and there was refrigerant going into the other zones, even though they weren't turned on afterwards. So weird things can happen with multi-zone systems. Okay. Anyway, digression. Okay. Winter operation. Relevant heat pumps, ductless multi-zone. Um, we need to talk to our customers about defrost mode, right? Because they're going to hear things. With most inverter systems, I have never noticed defrost in my house other than just hearing the sound of it, because the system I have just turns off the indoor fan during defrost. But I will notice that, like on the coldest night of the year, I can hear the unit running and there's no air coming out of the vent. I just know it's in defrost. We need to tell the customer that. Like that's going to be a very short time. If you're putting in single speed heat pumps and there's not a backup heating element, or I don't know, furnaces don't work well with that anyway, but the if you're putting in a single speed heat pump and you're oversizing it, that thing is going to go into defrost a lot more often than having a properly sized inverter heat pump. So we got to tell the customer, if there's frost on that outdoor coil and it's cold outside, it's perfectly normal. Don't worry about it. You're going to hear a different noise. Perhaps there's going to be like a little bit of a flushing sound or something. You may see steam coming out of the outdoor unit in the middle of winter when it's in the defrost mode. That's perfectly normal. Don't worry about it. As long as your system continues to keep your house warm, and that's normal. You'll be able to hear your outdoor unit on the coldest nights of the year. Tell the people all the time, how quiet are these? They're super quiet. The only time you're going to hear this generally is on the coldest night of the year. And if they keep their house warm all night, they may not even hear it then. But these units do have to crank up pretty hard to pull heat out of cold air. Y'all in the Tri-County area down there are kind of blessed with, you don't get to be 32 at night like we do where we're at. Although if your house is nice and warm, 32 doesn't matter. So you will be able to hear your outdoor unit on the coldest days of the year. More for unitary, you're going to hear the dang things all the time, right? Keep in mind the location of the outdoor unit, especially if it's next to bedrooms. If a customer tells you, I think we should put the unit here, I'm going, is that your master bedroom? Maybe we need to rethink this, right? Um, Mine's right outside my bathroom. When I get two bathrooms next to each other in my house, it's dead in the middle of the two bathrooms. So I can hear my unit when it's really cold outside. If I go into my front bathroom, I can hear it humming. It's the only place or the only time I can ever hear it. I can hear it from outside a little bit. Outdoor units are going to shed water. We need to tell the customer this. Even after we tell the customer this, and I'm telling the installers to tell him, and I'm telling the guy that does the job walk that he needs to tell. Like, we're going to put this unit here. I just wanted you to know this is going to create a little bit of water in the wintertime. It's completely normal. Would you like me to install a drain kit on this while we're still figuring out what the cost of the system is going to be? You may see water around your outdoor units. Perfectly normal. We also have a video around that, and that's going to be from just condensation during normal operation and defrost. It's also going to depend on what the humidity levels are. I know in the wintertime, the humidity levels are a little higher in Tri-County because you get all that beautiful, what they call June gloom. Um, we happened to go to Oxnard last week when they had these record heat days, and man, it was beautiful. It was like being in Hawaii or something. But I was told by some of the locals, it's not always like this. So I'm considering installing a drain kit to divert that. So there are some of these where we put the little plugs and the drain in the bottom, and we've got a PVC line taking it over to somewhere else. So consider doing that if it's going to be a problem, but you don't know if it's going to be a problem until you talk to the customer about it. So, okay. Uh, we got to talk about warm and not hot air and what that really means. We know heat pumps will put out 95 or even 100-degree air if they're fully ramped and they're operating in one speed, whatever. They'll do that, but they're not always going to do that. So we can keep a house warm, and I go through this whole process during the sale where I show them how the three parts of the cycle work: the air temperature recovery phase, the tempering phase when the unit is making small adjustments in its capacity to get everything in the house to be the same temperature. That's where I'm charging my thermal battery. But once that thermal battery is charged, I'm going to be heating with air that's very close to room temperature. You need to let people know that. And then you also need to install registers that are not going to blow air on them, right? But the three-way registers on heat pumps are not the right registers. So if we've got sealing registers, I'm always using a single direction curved blade register. I'm blowing it across the ceiling. I'm taking advantage of the stickiness that's created with the static electricity of the air moving across, and it's doing all of its mixing up here. And all I feel down here is just comfort, right? So um, if operated correctly, it's optimal to have lower temperature air. So it saves a lot of energy, first of all. It doesn't dry the house out as much as 125-degree air coming in. And then it also doesn't activate the attic insulation. When you have a downflow system and you're blowing 125-degree air out of that vent and it's going, a lot of that air is sitting up at the ceiling, which is sometimes why your face is cold and your feet are hot, or your feet are cold and your face is hot. So that also activates that insulation. When your ceiling is hotter than your room temperature, it's going to be a larger temperature difference from the attic temperature. So depending on how much insulation you have, it'll pull that heat right out of the room with a furnace. That doesn't happen with a heat pump because my ceiling should be the same temperature as my floor if we're doing this right. So better run cycles, good room air mixing with the proper registers will install. So make sure you're putting in the right registers on these things. Okay. Put in filters that last. We know from history that customers don't like to change filters. They're just, some people are really fastidious and on the spot about it, and then other people are just like, oh, we changed it last month, and you look at the filter and it says 1982 on it, right? So people just don't get to it, or they go, oh, I'm going to run to the hardware store and get a filter. I'm going to do that next week, and then it becomes 2 years later. So we got to make sure that we put a filter in that can last. So one of the things that we do here that's a little bit differently is I adapt every system to the same exact filter. Like 95% of my systems out there have this filter on them. It's a 20 by 20 MERV 13 April Air filter. It's the only filter that we keep in stock here. It's the only one I keep on the trucks. I do have some houses out there where we put a unit in the attic and it wasn't possible for the owner to go in the attic. So I have like a 2 or a 4-inch media in the grill, but I've got adequate noting around that. And then the customer can see that. But really good filters for a number of reasons. During those longer cycles, I'm really cleaning up the air with one of these. These filters are designed to work with 1600 CFM system at 0.2 pressure drop. If when I'm pulling 600 CFM across this thing, my pressure drop is super, super low, and it keeps the coil and the ducts clean. I always tell the customer why it's important to have the filter at the unit and not at the grill, but some people just don't want it at the grill. That's a very small number of people. Way less strain on the system. When you open one of these filters up, it's got like 30 square feet of particle trapping surface versus 2.5 square feet on a flat filter that just goes in the grill. Flat filters are going to get full real quick. When a heat pump has a full filter, it's going to throw off the efficiency of the heat pump and it's going to drive the energy costs up. If I've got a filter that can last a year and can even go another half a year over that without causing this critical problem, it saves on that whole my system isn't working well. And then I send out appointment reminders to my customers like, our records indicate that you have not done a maintenance on your system. So a good filter doesn't need to be replaced as often. Talked about that. Recommend a maintenance offering to replace the filters for customers so they don't have to remember. We do have a maintenance plan available for customers that don't want to get up there and do it themselves. But if a customer lets this thing go for 2 years and they call me and it's a problem and that thing's loaded with it, that is not my problem. I offered them a maintenance plan and they know that filter's up there. So I'm charging for that. Okay. Okay. All right. So heating system, do not dry out house air. The amount of moisture in the air is not changed. Yeah. Um, actually, a heating system that has 125, it depends on where dew point is. So The obviously we're not going to be pulling condensate air out of this. I'm sorry, I'm just answering a question here. So avoiding callbacks on HVAC heat pumps. Why do you like the filter at the unit as opposed to the grill? I will field that one right now, Spencer. Great question. One of the things is if I put a filter in the grill, it it doesn't have as much accumulated surface area, so it's going to need to be changed more often. And also where I have the grill in the ceiling, I have a duct that goes all the way over to that system, right? And then it goes into the system. If that filter gets plugged up at that grill, it can cause a massive negative pressure in that duct, and it's going to find leaks that never existed before. One thing, and it has the potential of pulling attic air directly into the system, which is dust and dirt. If I've got my filter right at the unit, I might get some dust and dirt in that return duct, but my filter is right there before the unit. There's no way that anything else is going to get in there. And if that filter gets restricted, it's not going to pull a negative pressure on that duct. It's going to pull a negative pressure on its own cabinet. So and we want big filters with a lot of surface area, and those are hard to fit into the grills. So that's really our philosophy on that, or our reasoning for doing that. Okay. Thanks for the question. Okay. Outdoor unit location. Relevant heat pumps, ductless multi-zone. It's really important that we put these in the right spots. This is an interesting picture of a job that I found like a year and a half ago. We got called to go out to this house to put a heat pump water heater in, and run a circuit to a stove. When we got out there, I found this 3-ton system. This is a 3-ton, super high efficiency, top of the line, like really expensive system. It was installed with a 220 volt air handler. This is before we had all these cool 120 volt air handlers. And it had a 10 kilowatt heater built into it. This was in a house that was 1,200 square feet in El Cerrito or Richmond, right down there. So Richmond is it's right on the bay. So it's a little bit like the coastal environment you guys are in. It's super, super mild. So they put a system in for this house. So it was literally twice as large as it needed to be. It's a fully modulating inverter outdoor unit, like unitary unit. So it has the ability to give them as much heat as it needed. And they still put a heating strip element in it and a 220 volt air handler. Three 220 volt circuits. And then they told the customer, you got to get a new electrical panel if we do this. So the customer puts in a new electrical panel. It was they went from 100 to a 125, or it was a 125 panel with a 100 amp breaker in it. And they took all this power. We come out there to do the stove and the water heater, and we're going, who did this? And right, it was somebody that came out and said they were an expert at electrification, and they basically knew how to install heat pumps and put them right on the path, right? So kind of this is a problem, right? But not using the right equipment and not sizing it right cost this dude a whole bunch of extra money, because he got the solar and everything sized for the potential capacity of this heat pump and all the other things. So he bought way more solar than he needed. We could have done this house with an 18 Fujitsu Slim Duct or a Mitsubishi or whatever, and he would have had better operation out of it. We would have used 2 breaker spaces instead of 6. And he wouldn't have had to get that panel, because then when he came in, he was installing his batteries at the same time that he was doing our job, and the circuit to his stove, and also the water heater, and he had to upgrade the whole electrical system to do that because he was way out. So I recommended a span, but he was already in contract with the people that were putting the batteries in to upsize the solar or upsize the panel. But he could have avoided all of this cost if the company that put this in would have just known what they were doing. So anyway, location is key. Location is key, especially if there's no existing air conditioner. We got to make sure we don't put it next to a bedroom. We don't gotta block the walkways if we can help it. We could save on line set by putting it near the air handler, but that sometimes is a pipe dream. So that's one of the things we look for, but it's not always possible. And then some circumstances we want to hang it on the wall. But on this guy's house right here, they put this where it was convenient for them to go up. They could have put it around the side of the house in the front. There was like 10, 15 feet from his property line. And it could have went there and it could have been bolted to the house. It could have been a system half the size. But for whatever reason, they stuck the thing right on his pathway in his backyard. So didn't make sense to me. Anyway. Okay, proper line set run. Always talk to the customer about the line set run. So we have one of the slides that pops up during our virtual assessment that's got some really trick looking line set cover that we've installed on jobs. And I have that there so I can explain. If we put this in your house, there are going to be lines going around. We're going to cover them and we're going to try to do as good a job as possible like this. But this is one of the things that's going to be in place. I don't want my customer to come home and see something that they didn't know was going to happen. And I've heard that from customers before, especially like the old flue pipes we used to have to put in the garage when you upgraded to a 90% furnace. And like I used to always tell them, like there's going to be this pipe that you're not used to, and it's not going to be beautiful because you can never make those things beautiful and have the right tilt back to the unit. And the inspectors want to see the purple glue primer on there, and it's just not going to be beautiful. So I've seen line sets. We were looking at, I just happened to look up this custom company's website the other day, and they had a picture of an outdoor unit like this, and they literally took a picture for their website, and the line set was uncovered and strapped with wire ties, and the wire ties were still sticking up, and it was just going up the wall. So, um, So always tell the customer about the line set run if it's going up the wall. If you're doing a multi-zone system, you should really make sure that you tell the customer, like there's going to be a lot of lines going everywhere. There's some beautiful houses we work at. And like I'm like, we need to avoid that because we're going to have all these things going everywhere around your house. Are you okay with that? This is what it's going to look like, and it's going to be going everywhere. Are you okay with that? I think you should do a ducted system so we don't have to have all that. Install UV protective material when you're out there the first time on that thing so you don't have a callback. Make sure that you foam the wall penetration on top and foam the bottom of the channel so you don't get called on that. And then support that line set in the attic or the crawl space nice and tight so it's not going to move around. Sometimes, but you got to have a gradual loop in it if you don't actually put a bend in it with your bender. Okay. There's probably no on that. Okay. Evacuation in charge. So we have to make sure that all this gets done right. So check pressures and temperatures first and diagnose. The we try not to ever hook up our gauges on a system, especially if we're going back to do service or maintenance, and we never hook up our gauges. Because when you hook up your gauges, you get enough refrigerant to fill this line. And on these systems, this charge is pretty critical. You do that 2 or 3 years in a row, and you've taken enough refrigerant out of the system to throw off the performance. But the other part is, where does that refrigerant go once it's in your gauges? It either goes into the atmosphere or it goes into the next system you're working on, right? So just think about that. So we always check temperature and pressure first, like temperature coming across the coil, temperature of the outside unit, check the temperature of the line, just kind of look and see if it is. And my maintenance technicians have these little things that they put on there that work with Bluetooth that they just put on, takes a test right there. There's no refrigerant getting into the lines. Sure, a lot of you guys have those. When you're evacuating this, and this is kind of hard sometimes, use a proper core removal tool to pull that core out. Make sure that and this picture is not clearly showing it. They're actually pulling a vacuum in this picture through the gauges. I don't let my guys do that anymore. We pull the vacuum directly to the system. There's a T on there with a vacuum gauge. We don't pull that through the gauges. Perform the decay test like you're supposed to. Purge with nitrogen mid-charge to remove any moisture or oxygen. And don't pull a vacuum on the system unless you know 1000% that there's no leaks. Okay, if you're thinking there might be, let that nitrogen charge up really high and let it sit in there for a while. Because if you pull a vacuum on this thing with no leaks, you're going to pull moisture into the system and it's going to be really hard to get back out. You're going to have to do a triple evac. Had that problem before. Don't evacuate through your gauges. Use the oversized vacuum hose and change your vacuum pump every once in a while, right? Change your vacuum pump oil once in a while. Ensure the vacuum holds low pressure for at least 20 minutes after stabilizing. If not, we got to figure out what's going on. Make sure when you have a system that has 5 heads and you got all this line cap going everywhere. And so maybe you've got a branch box on your system, or they're all coming down. You've got a ported unit. If I've got 5 heads, I've got 20 potential places for that thing to leak. I need to be really, really careful during this process as to not have one of those flares be leaking someplace and you not know it. There's more of a chance of a problem with that. One of the reasons we like ducted systems is because there's 2 connections on each end. There's way less chance for a problem to be created. Okay. So charging, follow your charging chart and make sure you weigh in the charge for the line set links. If you go to one of these systems and it's low on charge and you figure out there's a leak, is it okay to just top these things off? The manufacturer says no way, but Friday at 4 p.m. says I gotta come back here Monday to deal with this because I got 20 line connections and I gotta find out where this dumb leak is, right? So they're going to tell you never do that. If I've got a customer who's not going to have heat over the weekend, I have in the past popped a little bit of refrigerant in there, tried to look at my temperatures and my pressures, knowing full well that I'm going to come back early next week, evacuate it all out, and take care of business. Right? You can't necessarily do all that Friday at 4 p.m. Right? So weigh in the charge under a vacuum. Never charge by pressure alone. If you know what the weight of the charge is going to be, put that in there, break that last vacuum with that charge. It makes it super easy. I'm sure you know that. Never charge when running in heat ever. We don't want to do that. Some of these have a common suction port on them. Pressures will vary with pressure and operating range. I think, well, that's pretty clear there. I might have to reword that on the next one. But obviously we don't know what we don't know what inverter systems are doing at any time. Some of these systems have a button on them where you can do a test mode where we know for sure it's running in high speed, and then we have an idea of what it's actually doing. But if we're looking at this thing with our gauges and saying, wow, these pressures are super weird, and we don't know that that thing's in half modulation and the fan inside is operating at half speed, we don't know that. So we can't go in and adjust the charge on these like a regular air conditioner. So and there is the potential of being able to go run it up 5 or 10 degrees and then wait for it to get to its cycle, maybe 10, 15 minutes. So you know it's fully ramped. So you at least have an idea. But the best way to do it is just to check temperatures, make sure everything's okay. Check your static pressure on every visit too. Make sure there's no issues with that. Okay. All right. So thermostat setups relevant for ducted systems. Ducted slim duct systems and ducted inverter systems, there's a whole bunch of settings inside this thermostat where you're going to dial in that air. And different manufacturers have it set up differently. Like the Daikin has these trim levels above set point. Mitsubishi has this high ceiling setting. Fujitsu has a little bit more of a straightforward kind of static pressure setting. But in order to get in there, you have to change 2 different settings to change that. So we got to make sure that you guys know how to do that, that you're checking static pressure and we're setting up the fan properly. Because if you don't, it's going to create a callback when that customer goes to set that fan speed up to high and it just doesn't get what it's supposed to. So this is why they need to know their thermostats. So we have on our Teams link that all my guys have access to, we have these thermostat manuals in the Teams so they can just pull them up if they have a question. And then the lead guys have like a little cheat sheet on them. So adjust those airflow output static pressure settings. One of the Mitsubishis that we install a lot of, you have to turn off the constant fan function in heating and cooling. So otherwise that thing's going to run the fan continuously and that's going to drive people crazy. So you have to go into the thermostat and you have to defeat that setting. So make sure that's done. Otherwise the customer is going to complain about that. And we figured out we should do that in heating and cooling. For a while we were leaving on and cooling to circulate air, but too many people complained. So we just set them all to off between cycles now. Ensure the settings for on cycles are set properly. Yes. Manufacturer specific settings may be required. That's what we're talking about there. And keep the installation manuals on the truck. We had the installation manuals on the truck. Our field supervisor created a little cheat sheet. So that works out a little better. So they can go directly to the fan settings and set up all the other things as well. Okay. Check the static pressure of the system. High static pressure kills performance. So make sure that your guys know where they're checking it. I had a thing recently where one of my lead guys was checking the static pressure in the wrong spot. And it was only because we had a conversation with him. It was like, no, you don't, you need to check it before the filter and after the filter. Across the air handler is total external static. And he was checking it with the filter. So sometimes you have to figure out when people are doing things the wrong way or the right way and make sure that there's a correction made. But high static kills performance, causes more energy loss, way less delivered capacity. And every little bit counts on one of these machines. Everything I can do to reduce static pressure, which is another one of those reasons why I love those big thick filters right at the unit, is because when that filter at the grill gets stacked, that's going to ramp up static pressure really high, pull a heavy negative pressure on the other side. At least if that filter is right there, it's pulling air directly through it. It's going to have way less impact on static if they leave it in there for too long. Okay. So want to make sure that you put dampers in all the ductwork, that we size the ductwork properly at a static pressure setting, right? We want to, I'd rather have more ductwork delivering to a reduced size outlet at the end than too little of ductwork, or try to push air through a system that's too small. On inverter driven heat pump systems, when we're sizing them right, a lot of times we cannot go properly size a system on somebody's existing ductwork. We need to know what's there. We need to know if there's a wall can that goes up to the upstairs and they want the upstairs cool, and they've got an 8-inch wall, 8-inch duct going directly into the side of a wall can that's only 3x10, and they're expecting to get enough energy upstairs to take care of the cooling load. We need to know those things because all those things are also going to add to static pressure. Sometimes we're going to go to houses. I have one that we did where all the ductwork kind of just disappears. I didn't have a lot of control over it. So we had to make a bunch of adjustments on the way that system operated to lower the output of the system so that I get the static pressure down far enough, because I have no idea what's going on inside those walls. A lot of lath and plaster. A lot of customers don't want to pay that extra money. So we have to make adjustments in the field, but sizing is always important. It helps with that. If I'd have put a bigger system in there, it would have been impossible to do that. Okay. Okay, so 5 things to tell your customer. Let's go get on to the water heating stuff right now. So 5 things to tell your customer about their heat pump water heater. We have to start the conversation with heat pump water heaters don't recover as fast, and you're going to need a bigger tank than you already have. And I had a guy, we did the electrification expo last weekend, and I had a guy tell me, I only got a 30-gallon in my house. I only need a 30-gallon. I says, well, first of all, you got a big house, you got a 30-gallon. I'm glad you could live with that, but your house can need 65 gallons. And that conversation just happened at that, standing next to the water heater at the event, he finally understood. He says, like, your water heater has 10 times more capacity to heat water than this machine does. And we don't want the secondary heating elements to come in. So I need to have enough storage capacity to finally get around that. But if you look at this, like a 50-gallon gas water heater has a 40,000 BTU burner. It can heat water up pretty darn quick. A 65-gallon heat pump water heater only has 42 BTUs per hour before it starts bringing in the heating elements. To put these in and have them operate efficiently, we want to not have the heating elements come in unless it's absolutely necessary. The recovery times are longer. We get a first hour rating on a 50-gallon gas of 86 gallons. First hour rating on a heat pump water heater is only 67 gallons. When we look at the code requirements for the house, 67-gallon recovery isn't good on houses with more than 3 bedrooms. So this is an easy chart to go by. If they've got 3 adults or 2 adults and 2 children, they can get away with a 65, but they should do an 80. We should always put the biggest tank they will allow us to put in there, because the recovery time is less when we take less of a percentage of the water out for every hot water event. So if I'm taking a 10-gallon shower out of a 50-gallon water heater, that's 20% of the capacity. If I do it out of a 65, it's somewhere around 14%. It's 12% of this. If I run the tank temperature up and mix the water, I've even got more capacity. But we need to take as little out of the tank as we can because that shortens the recovery time when the cold water comes flushing into the bottom. Okay. Always talk about noise. Never talk about noise as noise. Okay. We always talk about it as sound first. So we always say, hey, this is going to have a sound that you're not used to. We have a slide with this cute little girl covering her ears, maybe because her daddy said a bad word. I don't know. We got it off the internet. That's what my kids always did when I dropped the bombs. The the It just said, how quiet is your lifestyle? And has this picture. And that introduces the topic with the customer. And I said, this is going to make a sound that you're not used to. Where is this going to be in your house? If it's going in the basement and it's next to a laundry room and it's above part of the something, I'm going to go, it's not a problem for you. But if it's going inside the house, this opens up that conversation. This is going to make a sound inside your house that you're not used to, and it gets very annoying for some people. So I just want to get that out there. And if they trigger on that, I start calling it a noise. And then once they hear noise, it's got a different connotation than sound. And so then I can sometimes sell them like a split system water heater, which is a little bit, which I know is never going to give them a problem. Like they're never going to hear it because the noisemakers outside, but it also costs more. So I make a little bit more money maybe on that. Hopefully, as a business owner, that's important, right? Okay. So set expectations from the start. Don't put these things in and let your customer call and just say, oh, it's really loud. One of the people from one of these programs in Ventura County actually told us that she got one of these installed and she was calling us to get advice on it. I'm like, they should have told you about it, right? That's really all I can do. They do make noise. However, customers are not used to water heaters making their noise. It's subjective. We got to be careful with comparisons. A tuba and a flute can be the same decibel rating. So, we need to talk, decibels are cool, but the noise is a noise. New models are somewhat better than the other ones. And if we can do a ducted model, and if we're going to put it inside the building envelope anyway, we're going to do a ducted model of some sort that can help reduce the sound a little bit. And there's some things that you can do to adjust that. Okay. So mixing valve, we got to put the mixing valve. It's a key component that you have to tell your customer about. So a lot of these units, if they're going to be in a high occupancy house, like if I'm going to put it in there in a house where 5 people live, I'm going to put an 80-gallon. I'm going to put this thing in hybrid mode for sure, and I'm going to turn up the temperature of the unit to make sure that they have enough water capacity. And then so I'm going to tell the customer, I have this machine set at 140. So when they open their app and they look at it and they go, that temperature is way too high, and they turn it down, doesn't throw everything out. So we're going to tell the customer, this is set at 140 on purpose, but don't worry, I've adjusted the temperature down for your house to a safe 120 to 125. If you need a little warmer water in the house, you can adjust this, but please don't adjust it without calling us. So heat pump water heaters recover at a slower rate because this element help provide the likelihood of running out of hot water. If for every 10 degrees we set this tank above 120, it gives us an extra 10 gallons of equivalent capacity. And the reason for that is because I'm trickling in more cold water with every gallon of delivered room or delivered house temperature water. So that's a good strategy if I've got a bunch of people living in the house and I really need to kick up the capacity on that system. Okay. We'll set the tank temperature higher than you might be used to and mix in some cold water so it's delivered just right. I'll give you the just right temperature, but give you all the water you need, fully explaining how this thing works. Because I have had a customer saying, I don't think we'll need one of those. We'll just keep it at temperature. No, you don't understand. We have to put this on, right? Okay. Cold air output. So people aren't expecting this either. Like we're just not expecting our water heater to blow out cold air. We need to talk to the customer about this. If it's going to go into the garage, it's probably not a big deal. The other part is we need a lot of space around the water heater to get the proper amount of air through the machine so that it can still run and blow cold air, right? So some cooler air will be exiting the water heater. This is going to make some people want to do something with this air. Okay, like You know, if you haven't figured out what their personality type is, by the time you get to this point and they say, "Oh, can we recapture that air and put it in the kitchen?" You're dealing with a C personality. Right? This is the engineering brain, the people that are going to analyze everything because they need to analyze how can I utilize those BTUs. They never want to let BTU go to waste. But you just got to tell them, you can simmer down a little bit. It's not going to run enough. The only way that you're going to be able to cool your wine room with this is if you go leave your bathtub faucet on, right? You can't predict how much this is going to run because when your garage is warmer, it's going to run less. In the winter, it's going to run more. You might not need the cool air in the winter. So this is not usable cool air. We also need to tell them in the wintertime, this might make the garage a couple degrees cooler in the area directly surrounding the unit, but your garage is already cold. That's a benefit in the summertime, right? It might temper your garage a tiny bit depending on how much hot water you're using. I have a 120-volt heat pump water heater at my house. So when my son was home, before he went to college, we all three took a shower in the morning. Me, my wife, and him all took a shower in the morning. That thing would run about 2.5, 3 hours to recover. It would keep the garage relatively cool. So, but if you have one that's a hybrid model, it might not do that. It might only run a 20-minute or 30-minute cycle because it's using that hybrid to kind of recover. The heat pump they only have the heat pump, which works against you when the garage is cold because it takes way longer for that thing to heat water when the garage is cold. Okay. So yeah, it's just a small amount of BTUs. It causes more issues than it's worth. I did have a guy talk me into doing this. He had the system in his basement and his basement workshop. And he was like, it already gets super cold down here in the wintertime. I would really just like to be able to move the air out in the winter, but I'd like some circulation. And it was right in that spot. And I says, okay, I'll show you how to do it. And I gave him all the stuff to do it, and we did it, and it was super ugly. It was like a Y branch with two dampers on it. And I said, are you really gonna remember to come and adjust all this? So I just at that point I said, I'm not gonna ever do one of those again. If in the envelope, venting just one side can cause pressure issues. So if you're putting one of these inside a closet, inside the house, inside the actual building envelope, um, and you only exhaust the cold air out, that's going to cause a problem because this thing is like a 125 CFM fan that's going to run continuously in the house. So um, that can be problematic. We don't want to pull a negative pressure on the house consistently because that's going to run up the bills. So um, we also, if we're going to have one of these inside, and we need to push the air we don't want to draw the hot air out of the we don't want to draw the hot air out of the attic to go into the system. We want to push the cold air potentially into the attic and make sure if we're going to put that duct up there that thing gets insulated so it doesn't sweat. But we don't want to pull hot air out because these machines, when they have air coming into them that's more than 119 degrees, they won't run anymore. So they'll just default to the heater strips. So um, that's a little bit of the details around the cold air output. Okay. So operation, we need to set these machines up to where they make the best use of the customer's rate plan. And so all of these machines, we want them to run in heat pump mode if we can. If it's a couple living in a house and we put a big water heater in there, chances are we can run it at 120 and we can keep it in heat pump only and they're going to be fine potentially until the garage gets too cold. I was told by somebody in Oxnard the other day that your garages don't get down to 40 degrees in the winter. They do quite often by us, but the when we have that, we need to tell them like you might need to run this in hybrid mode in the wintertime, and it's fine to run it in just heat pump mode in the summertime. You might find that to be okay. Run it in heat pump all you can. If you have an issue with like the shower was getting a little tepid at the end, put it in hybrid mode for the rest of the time. Company comes, put it in hybrid mode. Um, you can turn up the temperature if you have company coming, if you got the whole family coming over for the holidays or whatever. Um, but when you have it in heat pump only mode, it's going to lead to longer run times, and that's normal. You need to explain that. Best to leave the settings in the most efficient mode unless they experience delivery issues. When we run the temperature up on one of these machines, we run it from 120 to 140 and we put it in hybrid, it's going to use more energy than when it's just doing heat pump. But it's going to keep up with their needs. So We need to install we need to communicate all of this stuff when we're out there. The other thing we need to do is we need to set up their time of use plan when we're setting this thing up. So when we set up the app for the customer needs to be there. They need to put the app on their phone. You need to put all the information in the address. It's going to pop up with all the rate schedules in your area. You're going to pick the right rate schedule based on their utility bill. And then this thing is going to automatically respond to time of use. So it'll have a piping hot tank of water sitting there waiting for you at 4 o'clock. And it's going to set its temperature back between 4 and 9, save you some energy and some money. Okay. Tell that customer there is a condensate drain line there. If they don't, you're going to call and say, hey, your new system is dripping water. Come out and fix it. And if your dispatcher's not up to speed on it, he's going to send one of your trucks out there just to tell him that's normal. Don't do that. Okay. So 5 things you don't need to tell your customer, but you should do anymore. Avoid the inside of the house. We just talked about that a lot. If you can avoid it at all costs. Insulate these closets if you can. If you're doing electrical, always put a surge protector in place. Like in the disconnect switch. Make sure the thing has surge protection. That'll save you some service calls. Make sure the disconnect is in a place where it's easily accessible. Bond the wires back on there if there was a bonding wire on there. Do electrical load calcs. Make sure you're not overloading the panel. Make sure the condensate line and the TPR valves come low on these. You got to make sure that the TPR has adequate drop to get outside. It has to go outside. Otherwise, you have to have some other device on there to make sure it's not going to flood the basement or whatever. The condensate drain lines can go anywhere with these. They don't have to go into a neutralizer like a tankless water heater does. And also, it needs a 1/4 inch per foot drop. It can go into a pump. You can put it in the washing machine drain. So there's a lot of things you can do there. Pick the quietest unit you can if it's going to go in. And if you're going to put it inside the house, foam out the closet before you put it in there, and then duct the system and make it as quiet as possible. This one actually was as quiet as a fish pump, and when we closed this door, you couldn't hear it at all. They're not always that way. This one was like in the middle of the hallway, and we foamed the whole thing out. We had to put these little tiles on there to try to get a little bit of the sound out, and you could still hear a whisper of sound, which was, if you ever come to the water heating class, I'll go more into detail with that. But pick a quiet unit. But they're all pretty quiet now. So, and remember, a tuba and a flute can be the same decibels. Okay. Make sure the incentive requirements, if you're going to offer an incentive on one of these, there's sizing requirements for that. Understand the time of use billing. Be able to explain the programming of the unit. Look out for minimum uniform energy factor. Like some of these water heaters don't qualify for the incentive because they have too low of a UEF, a lot of the 120s. If you put one of those in and you promise a rebate, that's going to be a problem. Look out for the 120-volt sizing to allow good first hour rating. Okay, so what time is it? It's 9:27 and we're all done. Is there any questions out there that didn't get fielded, or if you want to call me out on some BS or whatever, we got a couple minutes.
Okay.
All right,
Larry, I think we're going to pass it over for
Okay.
closeout from 3C Ren. And
Very
then
good.
wrapped up with those logistics, we can hang on for any final questions.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Larry, for a really great presentation today. We always enjoy having you with us for these trainings. And thanks everyone for coming. I know it was an early one. We were trying something new with the timing on this. So I'll also use the opportunity to plug our survey that is live right now. If you haven't taken it yet, please take it. And some feedback we'd like to definitely receive in one of the free response buckets is, does this time work for you? Is there a time you prefer more than this? So if you haven't taken it yet, definitely fill it out. It really helps us out. We use all the feedback from these surveys to help inform our future course offerings. So let us know what you'd like to see more of. As a reminder, we're going to be sending you a copy of the recording of this training and the slides over email. So keep a lookout for that over the next few days. We also have some exciting courses coming up. It looks like there is a 2-part Electrify My Home extravaganza coming up in October. And Larry, if you want to plug this a little bit, I'll give you some time here.
Yeah. This is if you're into selling heat pumps or you have salespeople on your team, this is a great one. We're going to go into deep depth about the features and benefits we want to sell on these, what we want to talk about, and most importantly, how to figure out our customers so we know which thing to talk about with that particular customer. That's what we call psychology of the sale. We're gonna do a little disc profile action on there, understand the different personality types and the messaging that goes to those specific personalities, and most importantly, what not to talk about with certain customers to not get them to disengage. So that's a really fun couple of trainings.
Okay, awesome. It sounds like that's going to be a lot of fun, really interesting. So definitely you can reserve your spot now, sign up on our website. Again, it's 3c-run.org. And I think that's all from me. So I can hand it back to Larry and Alex for questions. Thanks, guys.
All right, if we've got no additional questions, we are at mark right now. So thank you everybody for joining us. I hope we got something out of this. Everything that we produced today is all stuff that we figured out because we didn't do it right the first time. And it all seems very simple, but some of this stuff takes process. So thank you again. We'll hopefully see you at Psychology of the Sale. And thanks, Chloe. It's nice seeing you. And we will check back next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.